Bengal tiger. Before the tiger makes a sound you can hear, it has already done something to you. Tigers produce vocalizations at frequencies below 20 Hz, below the threshold of human hearing. What that means in practice: before the roar, before any visible sign of the animal, a low-frequency pulse has already reached whoever is nearby. Researchers believe these infrasound waves can interfere directly with the nervous system, causing a brief freeze, a disorientation with no apparent source. The target doesn't know why it stopped moving. It just did. Then the tiger closes the distance. The Bengal tiger, Panthera tigris, holds territory across India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. A dominant male controls an area of up to 100 square kilometers. Not just moves through it, controls it. Every tree at the boundary gets marked. Claws dragged down the bark, scent deposited from glands between the toes, urine sprayed at nose height for anything that might walk past. The boundary is invisible to us. To every other large predator in the region, it reads like a wall with a very clear message attached. No allies patrol those borders. No coalition enforces the rules. The tiger does it alone, walking the full perimeter every few days to refresh the markers and check for signs of intrusion. If another male has crossed in, there is no negotiation. The encounter ends with one of them retreating permanently, or not retreating at all. The territory absorbs the outcome and moves on. This is what separates the tiger from nearly every other apex predator. Lions build coalitions. Wolves operate in family units. The tiger builds nothing. It relies entirely on the weight of its own presence, which, at 260 kilograms for a full-grown male, turns out to be enough. When a tiger brings down a large prey animal, a sambar deer, a gore, something that outweighs it considerably, it can consume up to 40 kilograms in a single sitting. What remains goes to whoever is willing to wait. Vultures, jackals, smaller predators that circle at a careful distance. The tiger doesn't share. It eats what it wants, walks away from the rest, and the hierarchy at the carcass arranges itself without any input from above. The empire doesn't manage its own leftovers. After a meal like that, the tiger may not feed again for several days. The calculation is efficient. One successful hunt purchases extended rest, extended patrol, extended control over the territory. Volume doesn't matter. Consistency does. There's something worth understanding about the stripes. Every tiger carries a unique pattern. No two are identical, functioning the same way fingerprints do in humans. Researchers in the field use stripe photography as a primary identification method. In rare cases where a genetic mutation removes the stripes entirely, the tiger loses its camouflage. Without camouflage, it cannot approach close enough to hunt. It doesn't starve because it's weak. It starves because it's visible. The stripes aren't decoration. They're a functional system. The most powerful predator in the forest, undone by a single missing variable. The hind legs are longer than the front legs. Built for explosive forward propulsion, leaps covering up to 10 meters from a standing position. The entire anatomy is organized around one moment, closing the gap before the target can respond. One last detail, and it's the strangest one. Tigers communicate with each other through a sound called chuffing, a soft pulsed exhalation through closed lips. Researchers interpret it as a non-aggressive acknowledgement, something close to a greeting between individuals who have no particular reason to confront each other. A tiger can apologize to another tiger. A ruler with no allies still knows the protocol for when paths cross without conflict. The emperor has manners. He just doesn't have many occasions to use them. Harpy eagle. The harpy eagle's rear talons are larger than the claws of a grizzly bear. Not chosen for dramatic effect, just accurate. The harpy, Harpia harpygia, is the most powerful bird of prey on Earth, and those talons can reach the length of a human hand. The grip pressure they generate approaches 400 kilograms. The skull of a full-grown primate offers no meaningful resistance at that force. The hunt is over before the prey registers what is happening. The harpy rules the canopy of Central and South American rainforests. Its territory spans up to 30 square kilometers of treetop, and every other raptor within that range gets displaced. No hawk, no competitor of any size remains in a harpy's hunting zone. Without a confrontation, it will not survive. The harpy doesn't share airspace. It doesn't negotiate altitude. It simply occupies the domain, and everything else adjusts. What makes this harder to process is the wingspan, 2 full meters. And yet a harpy navigates dense jungle at speed, threading gaps between branches with the precision of something a fraction of its size. The tail acts as a rudder, responsive, capable of redirecting the bird mid-flight between obstacles that look too narrow to permit passage. It doesn't slow down for the forest. It uses the forest. The bird hunts by sound as much as by sight. The disc of feathers arranged around the harpy's face functions as an acoustic collector. It bends sound waves toward the ears and amplifies them with the same basic geometry as a satellite dish. In the interior of a rainforest, where visibility collapses within a few meters, locating a moving animal by the sound of a branch flexing or a leaf displaced is what separates a successful approach from a wasted flight. The harpy listens its way through the canopy. When alert, the head feathers rise into a full crest. The resulting silhouette is striking, symmetrical, confrontational, and in a way that's difficult to describe without sounding theatrical, almost human. Whether that unsettles prey or simply reflects the predator's state of attention doesn't change the outcome. The effect is the same either way. A harpy can hold position on a single perch for hours, not scanning restlessly, waiting with the stillness of something that has already calculated when and where the opportunity will appear, and chosen to conserve everything until it does. When it moves, the sequence from branch to impact takes seconds. Female harpies are significantly larger than males, in some pairs close to twice the weight. The female is the primary hunter. She can carry prey approaching her own body weight out of the canopy without losing altitude, lifting a full-grown sloth or a large monkey clean off a branch mid-flight. If food becomes scarce enough, the pair redirects everything to the stronger of 2 chicks. Resources don't get split, they get concentrated. The weaker chick doesn't receive what it needs to develop. The stronger one gets everything. The logic is clean, the outcome is fixed, and there is no ceremony around it. Just a reallocation toward the higher probability of success. A 2-meter wingspan, a grip that closes at 400 kilograms, and the patience to wait all day for the 1 second that matters. Honey badger. A honey badger the size of a medium dog once walked into a colony of tens of thousands of stinging insects, allowed itself to be covered, kept moving, found the honeycomb, and ate it. This is routine behavior. The honey badger, Mellivora capensis, doesn't control territory the way the tiger does, or airspace the way the harpy does. It controls something more abstract, the operating assumption that nothing in its environment constitutes a threat serious enough to alter its trajectory. Beehives, venomous snake dens, food cached by a much larger predator. These aren't obstacles, they're destinations. The skin is the first reason this works. Loose, thick, and extremely tough. Particularly around the neck, where it reaches 6 millimeters, it allows the animal to rotate inside a larger predator's grip and respond from positions that should be anatomically impossible. A leopard bites down on the back of a honey badger's neck. The honey badger turns its head inside its own skin, faces the leopard, and engages. This is documented behavior, not an edge case. The second reason is neurological. Honey badgers carry a mutated acetylcholine receptor, the same adaptation found in mongooses and a small number of other species, that makes them resistant to neurotoxins found in snake venom. A puff adder bite, capable of causing rapid systemic collapse in animals many times larger, will put a honey badger on the ground for a few hours. Then it recovers, locates the snake, and resumes. Filmed, documented, not embellished. The third reason is the scent gland. Located at the base of the tail, it produces a compound so chemically hostile that larger, more aggressive animals have been observed simply disengaging from a confrontation after exposure. Not fleeing, just deciding the situation is no longer worth continuing. The honey badger walks away at its own pace. It eats almost everything with no apparent hierarchy of preference. Fruit, insects, eggs, reptiles, young crocodilians, roots, whatever the immediate environment provides. It raids the food stores of much larger predators without adjusting its behavior to account for the predator's potential return. It uses tools, primarily to escape enclosures in captivity, which it accomplishes by collecting and stacking objects to reach exit points. Multiple documented escapes across different facilities using the same general method. The Guinness World Records listed it as the world's most fearless animal for consecutive years. That framing isn't quite right, though. Fearlessness implies a gap in threat assessment. The honey badger isn't missing that process. It just consistently arrives at the same output. The calculation runs. The answer comes back. Keep going. There is a metabolic cost to running this way. The energy demands of near constant activity and sustained aggression require almost continuous feeding. This makes the animal permanently operating at a level of irritability that reinforces the aggression, which requires more feeding. The system runs hot all the time and shows no sign of being optimized toward calm. The Guinness listing, the documented snake recoveries, the tool use, the skin that allows it to turn inside a predator's grip. All of this has built a reputation so established that other species have evolved to borrow it. Young cheetahs are born with a silver-gray mane along their backs that closely mimics the honey badger's coloration and general profile. Predators conditioned to avoid honey badgers at close range tend to leave those cubs alone on the resemblance alone. The honey badger doesn't need to be present for its authority to function. That's a different kind of control, and in some ways, the most durable kind. Mountain gorilla. After losing a group member, a silverback has been observed refusing to feed for days. Not because of injury, not because of illness. The animal simply stops. It sits near where the group member used to be and waits for something that isn't coming back. That's where we start with the mountain gorilla. Gorilla barangay. Not with the chest beating, not with the raw physical authority, with the part that's harder to categorize. The silverback, named for the patch of silver gray that develops across the back of a mature male, holds complete control over the group. He decides when they move and when they stop. He decides where they sleep. He decides, effectively, who reproduces. Subordinate males are present but rarely succeed while the silverback is active and in good health. Every meaningful decision flows through him. It is not a council. There is no vote. He determines the shape of the group's existence every day. From a position of authority the group accepts as the basic condition of their lives. He also carries the full weight of protection. Every external threat, rival silverbacks, large predators, human presence, is his problem to face alone. He positions himself between the group and whatever is approaching. When the threat is another silverback, the encounter is preceded by an extended display. He strips branches from surrounding trees, beats his chest with cupped hands, producing a resonant low sound that travels through kilometers of dense forest and moves through the vegetation with enough force and noise to communicate exactly what's waiting on the other side of that sound. This isn't panic or rage. It's a broadcast. He's transmitting the size of the territory, the terms of its boundary, and what happens to those who keep advancing. Young males that reach a certain age get expelled before they become a political problem. The timing is deliberate. Not after a challenge emerges, before. The silverback reads the trajectory and acts early. The group's internal stability depends on the absence of competition, so he removes the possibility of it before it materializes. The expelled males leave to become solitary or form loose bachelor groups, waiting for an opportunity that may or may not ever appear. Here's something that took researchers years to document properly. Mountain gorillas select specific plants to address specific health conditions. Individuals showing signs of intestinal parasites have been observed seeking out and consuming plant species with documented anti-parasitic properties, plants they don't touch under normal conditions. The selectivity is consistent. It repeats across individuals and conditions at different sites. Gorillas appear to carry a working knowledge of the medicinal landscape around them that has nothing to do with chance. Their DNA is 98% identical to human DNA. They build fresh sleeping nests every night, constructing them from bent branches and folded leaves, never reusing the previous night's site. They spend close to 40% of their day at rest. Their nose prints, the pattern of ridges across the surface of the nose, are unique to each individual, functioning the same way fingerprints do in humans. The silverback that stopped eating after losing a group member eventually resumed. The group needed him functional, and the calculation resolved in that direction. But the behavior was recorded. It doesn't fit cleanly into any framework of pure instinct or pure dominance. It just sits in the data, documented, resistant to simple explanation. Chimpanzee. Between 1974 and 1978, a group of chimpanzees in what is now Gombe National Park, Tanzania, conducted a systematic, coordinated campaign to eliminate a neighboring group entirely. It took 4 years. By the end, the neighboring group no longer existed. This is the Gombe conflict, the first documented case of prolonged, organized intergroup aggression between non-human primates. It was not reactive. It was not a single confrontation that escalated. It was planned. Small groups of males moved to the border in silence, abandoning the calls and vocalizations that chimpanzees produce constantly during normal movement, located isolated individuals from the rival group, and overwhelmed them with numerical force before withdrawing. Then they returned, and returned again. Over 4 years, the same strategy, applied repeatedly, until there was no one left to apply it to. The chimpanzee, Pan troglodytes, shares approximately 98.7% of its DNA with humans. Depending on how you measure relatedness, it is our closest living relative. Watching its social structure, that proximity becomes uncomfortable in very specific ways. The alpha male governs through a combination of physical capability and active political management. Alliances are built through grooming, extended, deliberate social contact that functions as currency in the group's economy. An alpha who invests time grooming a mid-ranking male earns a coalition partner. That partner shows up when the alpha needs backup in a confrontation, reinforcing authority without requiring direct force on every occasion. When a coalition partner begins to accumulate enough support to become a threat to the alpha's position, the relationship gets severed. There are no permanent allies in a chimpanzee group. There are only current ones. Border patrols operate under a different behavioral code than normal group movement. The males go quiet. They move slowly, with deliberate spacing, into contested or rival territory. When they locate an isolated male from a neighboring group, the patrol's size advantage determines the outcome. Lone individuals rarely come back from those encounters. There is documented behavior involving rival groups young that falls well outside what most people associate with these animals. It has been observed at multiple research sites across decades of field study. It is not an anomaly or an error in the record. It is a repeating pattern, part of how territorial and social competition functions at its most unfiltered level. The alpha performs authority as much as he enforces it. During displays, he charges through the group's space, hitting hollow logs and exposed roots as he runs. The sound accumulates, builds, and by the time the display reaches its peak, the noise and physical movement together project something that is very hard to dismiss. Rocks get thrown, branches get pulled and dragged. The performance exists to communicate scale and instability. A convincing display often prevents a direct confrontation, which is the point. Confrontations cost. Displays are cheaper. In laboratory tests measuring short-term visual memory, specifically recalling the positions of a sequence of numbers on a screen after a flash of less than 1 second, chimpanzees consistently outperform adult humans. The processing is faster, more accurate, and the results have been replicated under controlled conditions across enough trials to remove statistical doubt. In that one specific domain, they are operating ahead of us. They are also roughly 4 times stronger than an average adult human relative to body weight. The strength comes from muscle fiber composition and neural wiring, more fast-twitch fibers, a nervous system built for explosive output rather than precision. A chimpanzee cannot perform fine motor tasks. It can bend materials that would stop a human entirely. They treat illness with plant-based remedies. Specific leaves with documented bioactive properties, consumed in ways folded, chewed, held in specific positions in the mouth that indicate deliberate use rather than accidental ingestion. This has been observed across multiple populations in different forests, with different plant species but the same underlying logic. Something hurts, something specific gets selected and consumed, and the condition improves. The alpha male governing a group today has no memory of the Gombe conflict from half a century ago. But he patrols the same kind of borders. He manages the same kind of coalitions. He performs the same kind of displays. The structure persists through individuals who never experienced what built it. It doesn't need them to remember, it just needs them to participate. Lion. When a new male takes over a group, the first thing he does is remove every offspring the previous male left behind. Not out of hostility toward the young animals specifically, out of arithmetic. A female nursing young from a prior male won't return to reproductive condition for up to 2 years. A male lion's tenure at the top of a group averages 2 to 3 years before a stronger coalition displaces him. He cannot spend that window waiting for someone else's lineage to clear the space. So it gets cleared. The females enter reproductive condition within weeks. The new generation begins immediately. The lion, Panthera leo, is the only social member of the cat family. Every other felid operates alone. The lion builds something more complicated. A structured group with a defined hierarchy, controlled access to resources, and a set of rules about who eats first, who reproduces, and who absorbs the risk of defending everything else. The dominant male eats first, always. Whether he participated in bringing the prey down or spent the afternoon resting while the females did all of it doesn't enter the calculation. The group settles, the male takes his position at the carcass, and everyone else waits. This isn't enforced through constant confrontation. It is accepted as the structure. The arrangement holds not because the male enforces it in every moment, but because challenging it costs more than accepting it. What the male contributes is defense and genetics. When a rival coalition arrives to challenge control of the group, the resident males are the ones who meet them. This is where the mane serves its function. It thickens around the neck and shoulders, absorbs force during direct engagement, and visually amplifies the animal's apparent size from a distance. The display happens before contact if possible, but it also retains heat in open, high-temperature environments and makes the male significantly more visible in grass. The symbol of status carries a real operational cost. He carries it anyway. Females in a group enter reproductive condition at roughly the same time after a new male establishes himself. The resulting cubs grow up as a shared cohort. They nurse from multiple females, develop alongside each other, and form a unit. The arrangement increases the survival rate of the new generation significantly. It also means that if the dominant male is displaced again before the cubs reach maturity, all of them face the same outcome at once. Male coalitions are the engine of lion power. Brothers, cousins, unrelated males who spent early life in close proximity. They form groups of 2 to 6 and operate together, holding territories that no single male could defend alone. The coalition is a joint administration. Enforcement is shared. Access is shared. Internally, one male tends to be dominant, but the structure doesn't collapse when the top position changes. It adjusts and continues. The males outside that structure live at the margins. They move through the edges of other groups' territories, underweight, heavily marked from previous confrontations, with no fixed range and no assured access to resources. Some of them accumulate enough condition and timing to attempt a takeover. Most spend their adult lives cycling through the periphery of a social order that has no place for them until they can force their way into one. A lion's tongue is covered in rear-facing keratin spines, papulae, dense enough to strip tissue from bone in a few passes. The same surface that maintains the coat and processes a carcass would, against softer material, cause significant abrasion in seconds. A single structure, multiple applications, built from the same geometry. The nomadic male moves alone. The coalition sleeps together. The hierarchy is always one successful challenge from rearranging itself completely, and everyone in the group knows it. Spotted hyena. In a spotted hyena clan, the lowest-ranking female outranks the highest-ranking male. Every male, without exception. A juvenile female who entered the world 3 weeks ago holds higher social standing than an adult male who has been part of the group for years. This is not a temporary arrangement or a special circumstance. It is the permanent operating structure of everything that happens inside that clan. Understanding what it costs to build and maintain that structure starts at the very beginning. Female spotted hyenas, Crocuta crocuta, have a clitoris that extends to the length of a functional external organ. Internally, this means the birth canal runs through a narrow, elongated passage that creates serious complications. During a first birth, the channel can tear entirely. A significant portion of first-time mothers and their offspring don't make it through the process. Among the offspring that do, first birth survival rates are lower than in most other mammals. The physical cost of the female's hormonal dominance is paid most acutely in those first hours of life. The cubs that survive come into the world ready, eyes open, teeth already developed. Within hours, if two females are born together, they begin establishing which one holds rank over the other. The hierarchy that will define the rest of their lives starts before they've moved more than a meter from where they were born. Males occupy the bottom of the social structure regardless of age, size, or tenure. They feed last. They access resources after every female, including cubs, has taken priority. They live at the periphery of the clan space and navigate the group's politics from the outside of it. A young female who joined the clan recently has already outranked every male present. That ranking never reverses. In tests measuring cooperative problem-solving, tasks requiring two individuals to coordinate simultaneous actions for a shared result, spotted hyenas consistently outperform chimpanzees. Managing a hierarchy across dozens of individuals, tracking every member's relative rank, and coordinating group behavior in real time appears to have produced a form of political cognition that routinely surprises researchers. The jaw generates force sufficient to process material no other land predator in the same ecosystem can access. Elephant bone, hippo fragments, horns, hooves, and teeth that every other scavenger leaves behind. Spotted hyenas digest these completely. Their droppings are white from calcium content. Nothing in the carcass goes unused. Each individual's call is distinctive enough that other clan members identify it at several kilometers. The clan tracks who is where, who is approaching, and whether a call is coming from a position that doesn't match where that individual should be, all from audio alone, processed while moving. The sound most associated with this animal, the vocalization described as laughter, is a stress and submission signal. It's produced by lower-ranking individuals communicating their status to those above them. The animal that sounds most like it's enjoying itself is usually under the most social pressure. And the scavenging reputation, spotted hyenas hunt between 70% and 80% of what they consume. Lions routinely appropriate their catches using size advantage alone. The actual distribution of who hunts and who takes the result has been misassigned in popular understanding for most of recorded natural history. Gray wolf. A wolf expelled from its pack stops howling, not because it forgets how. Because howling alone in a territory crossed by rival packs broadcasts your location with no one present to back you up. The sound that defines this animal in the popular imagination becomes a direct liability the moment the group is gone. So the expelled wolf goes silent and moves through the margins of other packs' ranges without announcing itself. The gray wolf, Canis lupus, is probably the most behaviorally misrepresented animal in the history of wildlife research. The concept of the dominant alpha, the individual who rules through continuous force and whose position must be defended in every interaction, came from studies conducted on wolves held together in artificial conditions in captivity. Those groups were composed of unrelated individuals forced into close quarters, producing stress-driven conflict patterns that don't appear in wild populations. The research was published. The terminology became standard. The animal it described does not actually exist in nature. In the wild, a wolf pack is a family. The individuals leading the group are the breeding pair, the mother and father. They make primary decisions not because they won a dominance contest, but because they are the parents. The structure is a family unit that hunts, travels, and raises offspring together. What looks like hierarchy from the outside is largely just parents and their children. Within that family, the structure is real and maintained. Lower-ranking members don't vocalize freely. Howling draws attention to the group's location, risks provoking rivals, and broadcasts individual presence in ways the pack hasn't sanctioned as a unit. The sound of each member carries a social cost that depends entirely on their standing within the family. Voice is not a right, it's a position. The hunt runs on managed exhaustion. The pack identifies a target and pursues it in a sustained relay. Different members absorbing the lead position at intervals, cycling through who bears the highest energy cost at any moment while the rest maintain pressure. The pursuit continues for hours when needed. The calculation the pack runs is simple: their collective energy reserve against the target's reserve. They run it accurately. A single wolf covers 50 kilometers on an ordinary day. Their sense of smell processes information at roughly 10,000 times human sensitivity, identifying individual animals, health status, and recent movement from scent traces left on the ground or in the air. One wolf, after a successful hunt, can take in 9 kilograms of meat in a single sitting to compensate for days of reduced intake. The anatomical boundary is specific and absolute. Wolf paws are built entirely for sustained movement. Efficient, durable, fast. They cannot grip. They cannot manipulate. Every interaction with the physical world beyond direct locomotion must root through the mouth. This shapes every hunt, every confrontation, every form of physical communication. One point of access for everything. The expelled wolf that went silent eventually arrives at a choice: locate an unrelated partner and attempt to found a new pack, or continue moving through boundaries it cannot claim. Some manage the first. Most spend extended periods at the margins, moving without announcement through territories that belong to others, feeding on what they find alone, making no sound that would confirm they are there. African elephant. A group of 100 African elephants can come to a complete stop because one female has not moved. She doesn't issue a signal. She doesn't make a sound the others can detect. She simply stays where she is, and the group waits. When she begins moving again, they follow. This is what fully accepted authority looks like in practice. Not enforced in every moment, just present. And the group already knows what it means. The African elephant, Loxodonta africana, matriarch, governs through a form of currency no other animal in her ecosystem can replicate: accumulated memory. She knows where the water sources are across a range spanning hundreds of kilometers. She knows which ones hold water through the dry season and which ones fail. She has navigated this landscape across multiple droughts over several decades. In the worst conditions her group will ever face, she is the one who knows which direction to move. That knowledge is the most valuable resource in the environment, and it exists only in her. The group follows because the group has learned to. Young elephants observe over years that the matriarch is consistently right. About water, about threat assessment, about when movement is necessary and when holding position is the better option. Her authority isn't imposed. It has been validated continuously through outcomes. Elephants reshape the physical landscape they move through. They bring down trees to access foliage, creating clearings other species use for years. They excavate into dry riverbeds to reach water below the surface, producing access points smaller animals depend on long after the herd has gone. They reinforce the same routes across generations, building paths through terrain that other species adopt as their own navigation infrastructure. The herd doesn't simply occupy the ecosystem. It constructs it incrementally in ways that persist long after the individuals who built them are gone. Male elephants periodically enter a state called musth, a hormonal phase during which testosterone rises to roughly 60 times its baseline level. During musth, a bull becomes aggressive in ways that override normal behavioral patterns. He challenges animals he would ordinarily leave alone, confronts rivals without apparent risk calculation, and moves through the landscape in a state of sustained agitation that other animals, including large predators, actively avoid. Even the matriarch's authority over him temporarily suspends. The phase lasts weeks to months, then resolves. He returns. The hierarchy resumes. The trunk contains more than 40,000 individual muscle units. Precise enough to pick a single blade of grass from the ground, strong enough to reposition a full tree trunk. Elephants also communicate through vibration. Low-frequency pulses produced by vocalizations or heavy footfalls travel through the ground and are received by sensory receptors in the soles of the feet and lower leg bones. The matriarch receives information about distant movement before the sound reaches her ears through air. Her information network runs below the surface of the landscape. African elephants carry multiple copies of a tumor-suppressing gene, far more than most large mammals. Despite a body composed of trillions of cells, each capable of the kind of mutation that produces uncontrolled growth, elephants develop cancer at extraordinarily low rates. The ruler is protected from the slow internal failures that eventually bring down most long-lived organisms. Young elephants raised without experienced older individuals in the group Those who grew up without the social modeling that comes from years inside a functioning hierarchy show patterns that don't appear in normally raised animals. Unprovoked confrontations with other species. Disruption of environments without the restraint that experienced animals develop over time. The hierarchy is not ceremonial. It carries information across generations that cannot be transmitted any other way, and without it, the behavior of the young degrades in measurable, specific directions. The final constraint is the teeth. An elephant grows 6 sets of molars over its lifetime. Each set moves forward from the back of the jaw as the previous one wears down and is lost at the front. When the 6th set is gone, the animal can no longer process food efficiently regardless of how healthy every other system is. The one who survived drought, rivals, decades of continuous movement across hundreds of kilometers, runs out of teeth. The body remains. The mechanism for sustaining it doesn't. The matriarch leads until she can no longer lead. The next most experienced female takes the position. The group continues moving. Some of what the previous matriarch knew transfers. Some of it was only ever hers. Orca. Some orca populations have learned to extract only the liver from a great white shark. A full-sized apex predator floats to the surface, intact, largely untouched, while the orca that brought it down has already moved on. The precision required to locate and remove a single organ from an animal actively resisting the process is not instinct. It is a learned technique, specific to certain populations, transmitted between individuals, refined across generations. Researchers classify it as a cultural behavior. The orca, Orcanus orca, has no natural predators. Not in the Arctic, not in the open Pacific, not near any coastline on Earth. Every large marine predator either avoids them or gets outmaneuvered. The great white shark, the apex predator in most of its own range, has been documented abandoning entire feeding areas for months after a single encounter with an orcapod. The relationship is not ambiguous. They are the largest members of the dolphin family. The name is a mistranslation that compressed over time. Whalers who observed them pursuing animals far larger than themselves began calling them whale killers, which became killer whales by the time it reached common use. There are no documented cases of an orca causing harm to a human in open water. In the wild, they show no particular interest in humans at all. The name attached a reputation the animal never earned in natural conditions. Each pod operates with a distinct set of behaviors other pods don't share. Hunting techniques developed within one lineage are not transferred to others. They remain inside the group, passed from experienced individuals to younger ones through observation and practice. Different pods have different vocalizations, different preferred prey, different strategies for pursuing it. These are cultural differences in the same sense the word applies to human communities. Learned, transmitted, maintained, and specific to a group rather than universal to the species. The wave technique works through coordinated geometry. A pod locates a seal on floating ice, positions at a calculated distance, then swims toward it together. Timed so their combined bow wave reaches the ice as a single surge, tilting it enough to displace the seal into the water. It requires spatial coordination that only functions because every member understands where to be and when. The technique exists in some populations and not others. The ones that have it teach it. When orcas engage with prey, they're not yet consuming, launching seals into the air repeatedly. Younger pod members are watching. The behavior serves as instruction in how to handle resistant prey, how to position relative to a moving target in open water, how to coordinate with others mid-pursuit. The prey is a training resource. Post-reproductive females, orcas that have stopped reproducing but continue living for decades, are among the most consequential members of any pod. They carry the longest memory of where food was found during previous periods of scarcity, specific seasonal locations, migration corridors, aggregation points that younger members don't yet know. When resources become scarce enough that survival depends on reaching those locations, the oldest female is the one who knows where they are. Her value to the group increases as conditions become more difficult. Males in captivity develop collapsed dorsal fins in nearly 100% of documented cases. The fin requires the lateral pressure of open water swimming in multiple directions to maintain its structure. Captive environments don't provide this, and the fin folds under its own weight over time. In wild populations, the condition occurs in fewer than 1% of individuals. It is the most visible indicator of whether an orca has ever been confined. They reach 56 kilometers per hour at speed. They sleep with one brain hemisphere at a time, keeping the other active for respiration and basic navigation. There is no window when the pod goes fully offline. Sperm whale. 230 decibels. That is the measured output of a sperm whale's Physeter macrocephalus echolocation system. A commercial jet engine at close range registers around 140. The threshold at which sound begins causing direct tissue damage in humans sits near 150. What the sperm whale produces during routine navigation and hunting is in a range researchers have theorized could cause physical disruption to soft tissue organisms in close proximity, not through any deliberate action, simply as a byproduct of an animal doing what it normally does. It does this at depths of up to 3,000 meters, on a single breath held for up to 2 hours. Pressure at those depths would incapacitate a human body in seconds. The sperm whale descends through it, hunts in complete darkness without any external light source, navigates by sound alone, and returns without apparent physiological cost. As a species, it has been doing this for millions of years. The brain is the largest of any animal on Earth, roughly 9 kilograms. It contains structures associated with complex social behavior, long-term memory, and emotional processing, with regions more developed in absolute terms than the equivalent areas in a human brain. What the sperm whale does with that capacity at 3,000 meters of depth in total darkness remains largely outside what researchers can directly document. They sleep at the surface, oriented vertically, body straight up and down, barely drifting, the head just below the waterline. A pod resting this way looks, from a distance, like a collection of floating columns. The behavior was only systematically documented in 2008, when researchers encountered a stationary group and recognized that the animals were not simply resting at the surface, they were fully asleep. The largest predator with teeth that has ever existed, motionless at the surface of the ocean, in a state of complete unconsciousness. The front section of the sperm whale's enormous squared-off head is occupied by the spermaceti organ, a structure filled with waxy oil. By routing blood flow to heat or cool this oil, the whale adjusts its own density, becoming heavier to descend or lighter to rise. The organ can account for a third of the animal's total body length and functions as a precision buoyancy system driven by the animal's own circulatory control. The skin of an adult carries circular scarring, raised tissue matching the dimensions of giant squid suckers. The squid encountered at 3,000 meters are not small, and they don't go passively. The marks on the whale record what happened during those encounters in complete darkness, kilometers below the surface, where no human observation has reached. The whale carries evidence of struggles that have never been witnessed. When a sperm whale consumes a squid, the beak, the dense indigestible structure at the squid's center, cannot be broken down. The intestine responds by secreting a substance around it to prevent perforation. Over time, that substance accumulates and hardens into ambergris. It has been used in high-end perfumery for centuries as a fixative that extends how long a scent persists on skin. The whale's protective response to an indigestible object produces one of the most commercially valued materials in the history of fragrance. Pod vocalizations differ between geographic populations to the point where researchers describe them as distinct dialects. Groups from different ocean regions appear to use sufficiently different acoustic patterns that communication between them may not be mutually interpretable. The same species, separated by geography, developing distinct languages, with no mechanism to share them across the distance. 1 metric ton of food, every day, Komodo dragon. Young Komodo dragons live in trees, not because the canopy is a preferred habitat for a large reptile, because the adults on the ground below will consume them if the opportunity is there. This is how the Komodo dragon, Varanus komodoensis, organizes its own population. The largest individuals are a direct threat to the smallest ones, which means juveniles spend their early years in the one environment adults can't access efficiently. They descend gradually as they grow large enough that the equation shifts in their favor. Until then, the only safe position on the island is above it. The Komodo dragon is the largest living lizard, males reaching 3 meters and 90 kilograms. It exists on a small number of Indonesian islands, which means its domain is geographically constrained, but within those limits, entirely without competition. Nothing on those islands challenges a full-grown adult. The venom system took researchers decades to correctly identify. The long-held explanation that the mouth's bacterial environment caused prey to weaken through infection has been replaced. Komodo dragons have functional venom glands producing compounds that interfere with the blood's ability to coagulate while simultaneously causing a sharp drop in blood pressure. The result is progressive physical destabilization that unfolds over hours rather than immediate incapacitation. The hunting strategy is built around this biology. The dragon delivers a significant bite, then withdraws and follows. Not at speed, at a walk, tracking by scent through a forked tongue that samples chemical information from the air and ground continuously, capable of detecting a target's presence from up to 9 kilometers away under the right conditions. The dragon follows while the venom works. The target grows progressively less capable of coordinated movement. The dragon arrives when the process has run its course. The entire sequence, from the initial contact to the conclusion, can span several days. This is patience as a predatory mechanism. Beneath the skin, the dragon carries a structural layer of protection. Thousands of small interlocking bones embedded in the tissue, osteoderms, forming a flexible coat of natural armor across the body. The layer is not visible from outside. Cutting through an adult Komodo dragon's hide with standard tools is not simple. The armor is simply present, built in. The teeth are reinforced with iron compounds during development. This produces the orange coloration visible on healthy adults and gives the teeth an edge retention that standard calcium structures don't reach. Serrated, iron reinforced, and continuously replaced throughout life as worn teeth shed and new ones emerge behind them. Female Komodo dragons can reproduce without any male involvement. The process, parthenogenesis, generates viable offspring from unfertilized eggs. It has been confirmed in isolated females held in facilities without male contact for extended periods. The lineage continues regardless of population composition or available mates. The dynasty requires no partner. A Komodo dragon can consume up to 80% of its own body weight in a single feeding, then go weeks without another. Between hunts, it defaults to near complete stillness. It can reach 20 kilometers per hour when it chooses to move with purpose. Most of the time, it doesn't. The juveniles in the trees cover themselves in the droppings of larger animals before descending to the ground. The scent masks their own chemical signature, the one that identifies them, to an adult's forked tongue sampling the air as something edible. They are not yet large enough to be safe on the ground, so they borrow a different identity, move carefully, and wait to outgrow the problem. Hippopotamus. What looks like a yawn is not a yawn. When a hippopotamus opens its mouth to a 150-degree angle, wide enough to swallow a watermelon whole, it is performing a slow, deliberate display of canines that can reach 50 centimeters in length. The gesture that reads as fatigue or casual stretch is, in practical terms, a controlled reveal of weapons. The animal is not tired. It is showing what it has and giving the other party time to reconsider their proximity. The common hippopotamus, Hippopotamus amphibius, is responsible for more human casualties in Africa than any other large land animal. Not because it hunts humans, it doesn't. Because it controls the rivers it occupies and does not negotiate passage with anything. Fishing boats that enter a hippo's stretch of river without the animal's implicit tolerance get charged, overturned, or disabled. This happens without warning signs that humans can reliably read in advance. The hippo isn't provoked into these responses. It simply maintains the boundaries of its domain against anything that moves within them. The canine display is the diplomatic version of this. The animal opens its mouth, holds the position, and waits. This is the warning. Most of the time, whatever is present responds appropriately, and the encounter ends. When it doesn't, the hippo operates at a level of physical capability that consistently surprises people who base their expectations on the animal's appearance at rest. On land, it reaches 30 kilometers per hour. This is faster than any human. For an animal that weighs up to 3,000 kilograms and carries the silhouette of something designed primarily for stability, this is not what most people expect. The build that looks heavy and slow in water is carrying proportionally enormous cardiovascular and muscular infrastructure. It goes from stationary to 30 kilometers per hour in a very short distance, and it does not need to be running towards something it wants to catch. It runs toward things it wants removed. In water, it doesn't swim. It walks along the bottom or pushes off the substrate in long, slow bounds that look like low-gravity movement. It can hold its breath for 5 minutes. A fully submerged hippo navigating a riverbed at speed is not visible from the surface until it wants to be. The closest living relative to the hippopotamus is the whale, not the rhinoceros, not the elephant, the whale. The two lineages diverged approximately 55 million years ago from a shared semi-aquatic ancestor. This relationship was confirmed genetically in the early 2000s and remains counterintuitive to most people who learn it. The skin produces a substance called hyposudoric acid, a reddish secretion that appears on the surface of the body in warm conditions and is sometimes described as the animal sweating blood. It is not blood. It functions simultaneously as a UV filter blocking solar radiation, an antimicrobial agent reducing infection in wounds, and a moisturizer preventing the skin from drying out during extended periods on land. A single secretion doing 3 distinct biological jobs, produced by glands unique to hippos among all mammals. The skin itself is up to 6 centimeters thick in places. Most available tools and most predator claws and teeth do not penetrate it easily. Territorial marking involves the tail. The male spins it rapidly while defecating, distributing the material over a wide area behind and to the sides. The radius of the deposit is a direct communication of presence and ownership. Other hippos entering the area encounter the information before they encounter the animal. When 2 dominant males contest the same stretch of river, the confrontation involves those 50-centimeter canines in direct contact. Researchers examining hippo remains have found skeletons from the beds of rivers with rival canine tips still embedded in the bone, physical evidence of the force and intent involved in those encounters. The animals are not sparring. The dispute resolves through outcomes that leave permanent marks. Hippos are classified as herbivores. Recent field studies have documented cases of individuals consuming the remains of other animals, including others of their own species, during severe drought conditions. The classification remains, but the boundary it draws is less absolute than it appeared. Saltwater crocodile. 65 million years ago, the event that restructured almost every ecosystem on Earth and ended the non-avian dinosaurs also cleared the way for most of the animals in this video. The saltwater crocodile was already here before it happened. It was here after, and in no meaningful way has it changed since. The saltwater crocodile, Crocodylus porosus, is the largest living reptile on Earth, with dominant males reaching 7 meters and over 1,000 kilograms. It holds territory across river systems, estuaries, and coastal waters from India to northern Australia. An unusually broad range for a species with such specific territorial behavior. Within any given stretch of that range, a dominant male controls the water. Other crocodiles that enter that stretch are removed from it. Smaller individuals don't return. The bite force has been measured at 16,000 newtons, the highest recorded value in the animal kingdom. For reference, a large lion generates around 4,500. A human at maximum effort produces approximately 700. The saltwater crocodile's jaw closes with a force that eliminates the concept of structural resistance for anything it can fit its mouth around. The muscles responsible for opening the jaw, conversely, are weak enough that a person of average strength can hold the mouth shut with both hands. The mechanics are entirely one-directional. When the animal secures a large prey item in water, it initiates a full-body rotation, rolling repeatedly along its own axis while maintaining the bite, using the inertia of the spin to separate sections of the target that the jaw alone could not tear. The motion is fast, disorienting, and mechanically efficient. It is the primary technique for processing prey too large to be swallowed whole, and it works because physics does most of the work once the rotation begins. The heart has 4 chambers and a specialized valve, the foramen of Panizza, that allows blood to be redirected away from the lungs and toward the stomach when needed. After a large feeding, The crocodile can activate this shunt to concentrate digestive resources in the stomach, dramatically accelerating the breakdown of bone and dense tissue through stomach acid of unusually high concentration. The animal digests what most other predators cannot, and does it faster when it needs to. A saltwater crocodile can generate enough upward force to propel itself nearly its full body length out of the water. This capacity is used to reach prey on low branches, the edges of boats, or riverbanks where the target believes it has achieved safe distance. The assessment of safe distance made without accounting for this is regularly incorrect. The sex of offspring is determined by the temperature of the nest during incubation. Warmer nests produce males. Cooler nests produce females. The crocodile has no genetic sex determination mechanism. The ratio of males to females in any given generation is set by environmental temperature at the time of development. A species that has survived ice ages, mass extinctions, and continental rearrangements by outsourcing sex determination to ambient heat. In August of 1945, a group of Japanese soldiers attempting to cross a tidal swamp on the Burmese coast during the final stages of the Pacific Campaign encountered a saltwater crocodile population occupying that water. The estimates of how many soldiers entered the swamp and how many reached the other side have varied across sources, but the British naturalist Bruce Wright, who was present in the area, estimated the number who did not make it across at close to 400. It remains one of the most significant mass encounters between humans and this species in recorded history, and the crocodile population that was there before the conflict was there after it as well. They can live over 70 years. They swallow stones that remain in the stomach permanently, assisting digestion and adjusting buoyancy. They have a valve in the throat that seals the airway, allowing them to open the mouth completely while submerged without taking in water. They were doing all of this before the first human ancestor stood upright. The regime is not new, it is just ongoing. Army ant. If the pheromone trail of a marching army ant column crosses itself, the ants will follow it, in a circle, indefinitely. They'll maintain the loop they created, each individual following the chemical signal left by the one ahead of it, with no mechanism available to any of them to recognize what has happened or interrupt the sequence. The column continues until the individuals in it collapse from exhaustion. An army of 2 million reduced to a non-functional spiral by a single navigational error, and not one ant in the formation has the capacity to notice. The army ant, Eciton burchelli, does not hold territory. It is not possible to hold territory when you have no fixed location. A colony of 2 million individuals moves continuously, covering new ground each day during active phases, consuming what the ground holds and moving again. The territory is wherever the column currently is. Everything in the column's path becomes available to it. Everything outside the column's path is irrelevant. They are completely blind. Every behavioral output of a colony of 2 million individuals, the route of the march, the structure of the formation, the identification of prey, the organization of defensive and carrying roles, runs entirely through chemical signals. Pheromones deposited on the substrate by individuals ahead, processed by individuals behind, producing coordinated behavior without any central processing point. The colony operates as a single distributed system. No individual has an overview of what the system is doing. In a single active day, the column can overwhelm and process up to 30,000 other organisms, insects, arachnids, small reptiles, anything that cannot move away fast enough when the front of the column arrives. The approach is not fast. The front of an army ant column moves at a pace a person can walk alongside comfortably. The organisms that don't escape do not fail to escape because they couldn't outrun it. They fail because the column is wide, the flanks are moving, and the routes away from the center become progressively covered as the formation advances. At rest, the colony has no nest in any conventional sense. The workers construct a temporary structure, a bivouac, using their own bodies. Individuals lock their legs together, forming chains and sheets of living material that insulate the interior, protect the queen, and house the developing eggs. The nest is built from the colony. When the colony moves, the nest dissolves and becomes the column again. When the column encounters a gap, a space in the terrain that the trail needs to cross, but that individual ants cannot bridge by walking, workers position themselves across the gap and hold. forming a living bridge that the rest of the column walks over. The width and positioning of the bridge adjusts continuously based on traffic. If more ants are crossing, the bridge widens. If traffic drops, individuals at the edges rejoin the moving column. Researchers studying this process have found that the bridge reaches an equilibrium between shortening the route and the cost of maintaining the bridge structure. The ants don't overinvest workers in the bridge past the point where it provides a net benefit to column speed. Among the specialized castes, the soldier morphology is extreme enough to create a functional dependency. Soldiers carry mandibles large enough to engage threats many times their own size, but those mandibles are also too large and too fixed in their geometry for the soldiers to feed themselves. Workers in the column carry food to the soldiers and place it within reach. The most formidable individuals in the colony cannot eat without assistance from the smallest ones. The column is followed. Certain bird species, antbirds specifically, travel alongside active army ant columns at a fixed distance, positioned to intercept the insects, small vertebrates, and other organisms that attempt to flee the column's advance and emerge from cover at the edges. The birds did not evolve to hunt with the ants. They evolved to exploit the panic the ants create. The column functions as a flushing mechanism for an entirely different predator that contributes nothing and takes what the disturbance produces. In several indigenous communities across Central and South America, army ant soldiers have been used as wound closure devices. The technique involves inducing the soldier to bite across the edges of a wound, the mandibles close and lock, then removing the body while leaving the head in place, which maintains the grip. The head holds the tissue closed until the wound has sealed sufficiently to hold without it. An insect with mandibles too specialized for its own feeding becomes a functional surgical instrument. 2 million individuals. No eyes, no central command. A navigational system based entirely on chemical signals left by other individuals doing the same thing. If the trail crosses itself, the loop begins. It runs until it doesn't. Cheetah. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3 seconds. The fastest land acceleration of any animal on Earth, built entirely from biology. And 30 minutes after a successful hunt, a spotted hyena walks over and takes the meal. This is the central condition of the cheetah's Acinonyx jubatus existence. It is the most mechanically efficient predator on the savanna, and it is also one of the most regularly displaced from its own catches. The two facts are not in conflict. They are directly connected. The sprint that makes the cheetah what it is lasts between 20 and 30 seconds. After that, the body has generated enough internal heat that continuing would risk systemic failure. The cheetah disengages, regardless of whether the hunt succeeded or not. If it succeeded, the animal needs 20 to 30 minutes of recovery before it has the capacity to defend what it just caught. During that window, flat on the ground, breathing at maximum rate, body temperature elevated, a hyena or a lion can approach, and the cheetah does not have the physical resources to respond effectively. It watches. The meal leaves with something else. Its hunting success rate sits around 50%, more than double the lion's 20%. The cheetah hunts with extraordinary precision and commits with full execution. When it selects a target from a herd of hundreds, it tracks that specific animal through the chaos of the group scattering, ignoring every other individual that crosses its path, maintaining focus on the chosen target until the pursuit concludes or fails. The target selection happens before the chase begins, and the commitment to it is absolute once the sprint starts. The anatomy is built for exactly one thing. Non-retractable claws function like track spikes, permanent contact with the ground on every stride. The tail acts as a counterweight and steering rudder, allowing direction changes at speed that the legs alone couldn't produce. The spine flexes to extend the stride beyond what the leg length alone would generate. Every system in the cheetah's body has been optimized for the sprint at the expense of everything else. The skull is small and streamlined for aerodynamics, which means the jaw is correspondingly reduced. The teeth are functional for securing prey, but not for competing with larger predators over a carcass. The cheetah cannot fight a lion or a hyena for the meal. It can outrun them to the target, but once the target is on the ground and the sprint cost has been paid, the size hierarchy reasserts itself without exception. The genetic situation is unusual enough to be worth noting separately. All cheetahs alive today are so genetically similar to each other that a skin graft from one individual to an unrelated individual produces no immune rejection response. The body accepts foreign tissue as its own because the genetic distance between individuals is too small to trigger the normal recognition system. This suggests the species passed through a severe population collapse approximately 10,000 years ago, a bottleneck so extreme that the current global population descends from a very small number of survivors. Every cheetah alive is, in genetic terms, nearly identical to every other one. Cheetah cubs are born with a silver-gray mane running along the back that closely matches the coloration and profile of the honey badger, the animal from the beginning of this video. Predators that have learned to avoid honey badgers at close range tend to leave cheetah cubs alone based on the visual similarity alone. The cheetah borrows a reputation it didn't earn to protect the generation that hasn't developed one yet. The cheetah does not roar. It purrs. It vocalizes in chirps and high-pitched calls that are acoustically indistinguishable from those of a domestic cat. The fastest land predator on Earth sounds like a house cat when it's content. Acorn woodpecker. One tree, 50,000 holes, one acorn in each. The acorn woodpecker, Melanerpes formicivorus, selects a single large tree, called a granary tree, and spends years converting it into a food storage facility of extraordinary density. Every hole is drilled to a specific diameter for a specific acorn, sized tight enough that the acorn won't fall out and can't be easily extracted by anything without the beak geometry to do it. The tree becomes the entire economic foundation of the group that maintains it, and that group defends it accordingly. Any animal that approaches the granary tree with apparent interest, a squirrel, a jay, another woodpecker from outside the group, triggers a response from the entire collective, not from the nearest individual, from all of them. The group mobilizes and pursues the intruder in a coordinated mass that continues until the threat has been removed from the area. If an acorn is actually taken, the response escalates. Researchers describe it as a collective alarm state that doesn't resolve until the situation has been addressed. The granary is not negotiable. The acorns require ongoing management. As they dry after being stored, they shrink. A shrunken acorn rattles in its hole and can be extracted easily. The woodpeckers move acorns from hole to hole continuously throughout the season, transferring each one to a tighter hole as it shrinks, keeping every acorn secured at the correct fit at each stage of drying. This is active inventory management, maintained across 50,000 storage units by a group of birds working in rotation. Offspring from previous seasons remain with the group instead of establishing their own territories. They assist in collecting, storing, and defending the granary in exchange for remaining members of the group. The system works because the granary requires more labor to maintain and defend than a breeding pair can provide alone. The young adults contribute labor. The group provides security and eventual reproductive access. It is a functional division of work organized around a shared resource. Multiple females in the group may deposit eggs in the same nest. When this happens, the females monitor each other's eggs and remove any that were laid before their own. A form of internal competition that plays out at the level of egg timing and detection. The group raises offspring cooperatively, but the question of whose offspring get raised is contested from the moment of laying. The cooperation is real. So is the competition inside it. A woodpecker strikes at 20 impacts per second. The tongue is long enough that it stores wrapped around the inside of the skull when not in use, serving simultaneously as a retrieval tool and as a shock absorption layer that protects the brain from the repeated impact force. The tool and the protective gear are the same organ. 50,000 storage units, managed continuously, defended collectively, by a bird most people would not cross the street to avoid. Canada goose. In a zoo in the United States, a Canada goose was recorded chasing a gorilla out of a space the goose had decided was its territory. The gorilla left. The Canada goose, Branta canadensis, does not have meaningful natural predators in most urban environments. It is aware of this. The behavioral profile that evolved to navigate ecosystems with actual threats has been applied, without modification, to parks, corporate lawns, golf courses, and parking lots, environments where nothing can effectively respond to it. The result is an animal that operates with the behavioral confidence of something at the top of a food chain, because in those environments, it effectively is. Within 5 meters of an active nest, the goose attacks. Not bluffs, attacks. The target is irrelevant. A child, a large dog, an adult human who misjudged the distance. The wings are not soft. The bones inside them are dense, and the strike from a fully extended wing at close range lands with meaningful force. The beak follows. The goose does not have a threshold of opponent size above which it recalculates the decision. The serrations inside the beak, lamellae, run along the edges and across the tongue. They are designed for gripping and processing aquatic vegetation, but they function as capable gripping surfaces during an encounter with anything the goose has decided requires a response. The species practices philopatry. Individuals return to the exact location where they were born to establish their own nests. If a goose claims a section of a park in a given year, its offspring will attempt to claim the same section. Its offspring's offspring will do the same. The territorial relationship with a specific piece of ground is transferred across generations without any single individual needing to defend it continuously. The claim persists through the lineage. Once a year, every flight feather drops simultaneously. For several weeks, the animal that was flying at 90 kilometers per hour during migration cannot fly at all. It is grounded, limited to the ground and water, with no aerial capacity. This is the one window when the operating conditions shift entirely, and it resolves on its own schedule, without the goose doing anything to accelerate it. 90 kilometers per hour in migration. In the parking lot, it walks towards you and does not slow down. Pepsis wasp. The Schmidt Sting Pain Index is a scientific scale created by entomologist Justin Schmidt, who allowed himself to be stung by hundreds of insect species in order to document and describe the experience of each one. For the Pepsis wasp, Pepsis formosa, he described the sensation as comparable to a hairdryer falling into a bathtub while you're in it. The pain lasts approximately 3 minutes. It is rated the second most intense entry on the entire index. The 3 minutes pass. The pain stops completely. There is no lasting tissue damage. For the wasp, that sting is not a primary weapon. It is incidental, a defensive response to being handled or stepped on. The sting that incapacitates a human for 3 minutes is, in the wasp's actual operational context, a paralysis tool used on tarantulas. The Pepsis wasp locates a tarantula, sometimes by scent through soil before the spider has emerged, and initiates a physical confrontation with an animal that can be 5 times its own mass. The legs of the wasp carry specialized hooks positioned at the joints, designed to grip the thinner membrane between the tarantula's leg segments, where the exoskeleton is thinnest. The wasp maneuvers the spider into a position where the sting can be delivered with precision into the nervous system. The sting does not end the tarantula, it suspends it. The spider's motor systems shut down while its basic biological functions continue. It remains in this condition, immobile, intact, alive, for weeks. The wasp drags the tarantula to a prepared burrow, positions it, deposits a single egg on the abdomen, and seals the chamber. The larva that hatches begins consuming the tarantula from the outside in, progressing through the tissue in a sequence that leaves the organs most critical to basic biological continuation for last. The tarantula remains in the suspended state throughout. The larva's food source stays viable for the entire development period. When the larva reaches full development, the tarantula is gone. The wasp that emerges from the burrow has never seen its parent. The adult Pepsis wasp feeds on nectar and fermented fruit. Fermented fruit contains alcohol. Researchers have documented adult wasps consuming enough fermented material to affect their coordination. The animal, whose larval stage runs one of the most precise biological processes in the invertebrate world, spends its adult life occasionally disoriented from fruit. Almost nothing hunts it. Birds that will attempt nearly any insect leave the Pepsis wasp alone. The reputation built by the sting, information that spreads through population-level experience rather than any individual learning process, is sufficient to make the wasp functionally off-limits to most predators that share its environment. The bright metallic coloration it carries is a signal that communicates this status on site. It is not aggressive toward humans. It doesn't investigate, doesn't hover in warning displays, doesn't respond to proximity. If a human steps directly onto one, or grabs one, the response is the one on the Schmidt index. Otherwise, It continues with what it was doing. Fishing spider. The fishing spider detects vibrations in the surface of water at a resolution measured in nanometers. This allows it to distinguish between a leaf landing on the surface and a small fish moving 2 centimeters below it, and to identify from the vibration pattern alone which direction the source is moving and approximately how large it is. The fishing spider, Dolomedes, does not build a web. It hunts actively across 2 environments simultaneously, the water surface and the ground at the water's edge, using the boundary between them as the operational zone. The surface tension of water, which most organisms treat as a barrier or an obstacle, is the spider's primary working medium. It runs across water faster than most of the fish it targets can swim in short bursts. The hydrophobic hairs covering the legs distribute the spider's weight across the surface tension without breaking it. The spider never actually becomes wet in the conventional sense. The hair layer traps air against the body, maintaining a permanent micro-layer of atmosphere around the animal, regardless of how much time it spends in contact with water. It can submerge fully for up to 30 minutes using this trapped air as a temporary supply, hunting beneath the surface before returning. The ambush position uses both environments at once. Rear legs anchored to solid ground, front legs resting lightly on the water, spread wide to maximize the surface area available for vibration detection. In this position, the spider is motionless, sometimes for extended periods, until the surface registers the specific pattern that matches a viable target. The fish that triggers the response may be larger than the spider. This is not a deterrent. The strike introduces enzymes through the fangs that begin dissolving the internal tissue of the fish immediately. The spider does not consume the target in the conventional sense. It extracts liquid from a fish that is being converted from the inside into a concentrated nutritional fluid. The process is efficient and requires no additional processing after the initial injection. The spider can also sail. By raising legs and orienting the body to catch wind, it can move across the water surface without any physical contact with the substrate below. This is used to cover distances between feeding areas that would be too slow to cross by running. During mating, the male approaches the female carrying a prey item, a wrapped insect, a caught fly, something with demonstrable food value. The offering is presented before any other contact. While the female is occupied with it, the male completes the interaction and withdraws. The offering buys the time required. The males that don't move fast enough with the offering, or arrive without one, don't get the same outcome. They become it.